Welcome back to another episode of the Filmaholic. This is our One Tree Hill rewatch. Today we are on Season 3, Episode 5 through 8. So to kick things off, Episode 305, A Multitude of Casualties. It originally aired November 2nd, 2005, was directed by Thomas J. Wright, who had a total of 9 episodes. This is the 6th of the 9th episode that he did. It was written by R. L. Fleming, Jr. And this was his third of 4 episodes. And an interesting fact is he also produced most of Season 2. And Season 3, he produced 316, I know for sure. This is the Midnight Madness episode. So it was the kickoff, or not the kickoff of the basketball season, but preparing for that basketball season with the Midnight Madness. And it was an episode that starts and with one scene, like a good opening, that gets you really involved as an audience. And then it goes back in time a couple days before and leads you up to this moment, which I thought was an interesting way to start the episode. And I know the only episode I think has been like this before was the episode in Season 1 where Nathan and Lucas are dropped off on the bus after their fight, and they have to run from the thing 1 and 2, and they find Peyton, Brooke, and Haley together in the car. So it kind of like a little bit similar to that, which is this is good because I like that episode as well. Haley and Rachel join the cheerleading squad in this episode. That's a big thing about the season because they'll be spending a lot of time with the other ladies on the cheer squad. I thought this was a smart move to get all the characters involved like together, so you share a lot of scenes, and it was good for Haley because especially with Haley and Nathan's relationship, you needed them to have on-screen time a lot, but you were going to be focusing a lot on Nathan's basketball career on the team and everything in this season, and this was a good way to get her there. And it made sense for her character too because of that reason. She would want to be close to Nathan, and that is a point that Brooks makes to her, is that Nathan, you'll be spending a lot of time together if you join the team. Brooke wants her on the team because they need that spot. She doesn't want Rachel on that spot. But Rachel is a new character they obviously wanted on the show to cause problems and to spice things up, so they brought her in. Nathan is made the team captain of the basketball team in this episode by Whitey, which obviously makes a lot of sense. He's the best player on the team. He's the best scorer. Has the most potential for an actual career, and he has a good relationship with Whitey, so he's made team captain, but this is troubling between him and Lucas, who are having a bad relationship right now. And obviously, if you go to the Midnight Madness thing, from the start of the episode, they get in a fight, so going back in time, sets everything up, why this happened, and ultimately the episode ends with Whitey making Lucas co-captain, so they're either going to bring this team up or tear this team apart throughout the season. So one of my favorite things about this episode, and it's continued definitely into the next episode, but the back and forth between Dan and Deb is amazing in this season, which is really still interesting too, because at this point, especially as an audience, you don't know that Deb is the one that started the fire, but she's having to hide this from Dan, so this adds to, when you know things, it adds to her hate for him even more, but their chemistry together on camera is awesome. The writing is really good. They're back and forth. But yeah, solid episode. Like I said, most episodes in this season are solid. Then we get to the next episode, 306, Locked Hearts and Hand Grenades, written by Chad Fivish and James Patrick Sturrocks. I don't know how to pronounce their name, sorry. Third, 4 episodes total that they wrote, and they also produced the 3rd season here. It was directed by Marita Grabik, who this is the only episode that she directed. However, the interesting thing when I was looking her up was that she's went on to do a lot of stuff, went on to direct a lot of shows, but she also directed an episode of Season 6 of American Horror Story, the Roanoke season, which is probably the best season of American Horror Story, at least my favorite. Season 1 might be the best, but that's a topic for another time. And this episode aired November 9th, 2005, so we are moving throughout November now. This episode, we see that Lucas is being slowed down by his HCM. It's a big part of them training for the basketball season in this episode. Lucas slowing the team down. and it's because of his HCM. It's because he's taking that medication. It's because of all of that. And he talks to Whitey about it. And Whitey, kind of an asshole sometimes. He doesn't really care what Lucas said and ends up taking down the team even more, which causes Nathan and Lucas to continue their fighting and whatnot. And Brooke creates, because there been like fights within the cheer squad of people going after the same guy, Brooke creates a fantasy boy draft. She gets the idea from Lucas, who is creating a fantasy basketball draft. And that goes terribly because Brooke makes a stupid decision to try. Obviously she's a manipulator, and she knows that probably that Brooke is going to try something, so she lets it leak that she wants Chris Keller. So ultimately, Brooke picks Chris Keller to try to fuck with Rachel, and it all gets messed up, and Lucas ends up with Rachel, and Brooke ends up with Chris Keller. One thing I did like about this, because we do see Mouth trying to be a pick in this episode, which I think Mouth's funny. Peyton ends up picking Mouth. He's like the number one pick. I think that was pretty funny, pretty cool. And Haley gets Nathan because Peyton lets it happen. She was thinking about taking Nathan to herself just to mess with Haley because they were having a rough relationship in this season. And she finally, Haley starts to fight for Nathan, and Peyton likes that and respects it, so she ends up choosing Mouth. But yeah, so this sets a problem for the next few episodes that Rachel is with Lucas and Brooke has Chris Keller, which all leads us right into the next episode, which is 307, Champagne for My Real Friends, Real Pain for My Sham Friends. This episode aired November 16th, 2005, and was directed by Paul Johansson. This is the second time he's directed an episode. He usually gets some good episodes throughout the series, and he's a really good director. I probably would have had him direct even more episodes if I was in charge, if he wanted to. And it was written by Mark Schwann. So, obviously, the big thing about this episode is the dates for the fantasy boy draft thing. Everyone's going on dates with who they picked. So, Brooke has to go with Chris Keller. She wasn't going to go, but Nathan shows up, and him and Haley are going to go on their date. And if Brooke doesn't go with Chris, Nathan wasn't going to go with Haley. So, for Haley, Brooke ends up going. Peyton ends up going with Mouth, but Mouth is doing a thing with his grandpa. It's not revealed to this grandpa until later in the episode, but that thing was really sweet. I usually don't like when they bring a character in for one episode, and it's just like a one-off thing. I usually don't think it adds too much. I don't like it, but I did like the Grandpa Mel storyline because it adds more to Mouth. It adds more to his character, his backstory that we didn't know. It was genuinely good, and it also adds more to Peyton too. And having her think about Ellie. So, yeah. I actually like this one. There's other ones in the season that we'll talk about that I don't like when they bring in characters for an episode that I think is just bad, but we'll talk about it later. Lucas finds Brooke ending, spoiler, heavy thing about this episode ending. Cliffhanger, if you will. He walks in after he's been with Rachel this whole time, and how he's talked about Brooke's the one for him and all this, and he walks in to see Brooke, and she's in bed with Chris, which will lead right into the next episode, but I remember watching it on TV for the first time and that happening, and, being on fan sites and everything, and people going crazy because it was such a what the fuck moment, and a sad moment. Didn't like it. And once again, I know I've talked about this before, but they really changed things up with Chris Keller's character moving forward. They also had the little bit in this episode that was kind of funny, but it was stupid in a way, and that was Karen and Deb graffiti Dan's campaign sign. I don't have a big problem with it because I did think it was kind of funny, but it wasn't that good, I guess, like the writing was. I don't know. Then we go into the last episode we'll talk about here, and that is November 30th, 2005, the episode The Worst Day Since Yesterday aired. This was 308. Continues right kind of from the last episode, and also like sets up the mid-season finale of this season. Oh, at the end of yeah, no, never mind. Sorry. Um, so Lucas is dealing with it. He's obviously very upset. Brooke's really upset. Yeah, it's bad. um, Not the episode. The episode's really good, but everything that's happening is bad. And we also have the first basketball game of the season, which they lose. Right? Lucas is definitely not into it. He's out of it, and the team just isn't doing that well. Nathan is doing well himself, but I don't think because of his relationship with Lucas, and also I don't think everyone else in the team has it together like he does. Um, Dan assaults Nathan in this episode. In the locker room after the game, he kind of comes in there and does his Dan thing with Nathan, and ends up. He's got a lot of issues this season. He's fucked up in the head at this point, really. And I'm like legitimately saying that. I think he is. Like, he's just of his character, where his character is mentally, and he Nathan smarts off to him, and he like grabs Nathan and like does that, and Mouth records it, which then he takes to Karen, which sets us up for the next episode that they're going to use that footage to run a negative ad about Dan, which, I mean, it's a real ad, so they definitely should have done that. And Whitey the season, but he actually lets the team know and lets it become like a public thing in this episode. And then also a little funny thing that I really liked was that Tim gets a tattoo in this episode of his number 55, and then Whitey changes his number to 00, which I think is hilarious. Also, another thing, I think this is the last episode that we see Tim. I mean, obviously, he comes back later in the show, but as far as the high school years go, this is the last episode that Tim is in. And now, I don't really know the whole backstory behind that. I would be kind of interested to know if anyone out there does. Did the actor move on to other things? Was he moving from the area? What was the reason? Or did they just decide to write Tim off? Because in the show, Tim was really just there for comedic purpose. And as a friend of Nathan, kind of like a sidekick to Nathan in those early episodes. And then he was just kind of there, and they didn't really know what to do with him. And when they bring him back in season 5 of that episode, it's really good. Like, they handle that well. But it's interesting that he leaves. And he's mentioned in season 4. His absence is mentioned as far as his character goes. But also, this episode was directed by John Asher. It was the second of his 7 episodes that he does through season 6. And it was written by Mike Hero and David Strauss, who are 2 of my favorite writers on the show. Even though they wrote my least favorite episode. They also wrote my favorite episode, as well as other really good episodes. And this is the second time that they bring an episode on the show. Alright guys, that's our 4 episodes that we're talking about today. The next video that I'll be doing will be talking about episode 209 through 309 through 312. Which 312 is also written by Mike Hero and David Strauss, so we'll be talking about that. And it's one of my favorite episodes of the season, actually. And we'll talk about it then. But yeah, I will see you guys next time.